Okay, I just need to double check, and then you can start. Yes, Bruno, we are live.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Product People Tuesday live event. We will soon begin here, and we will be streaming on YouTube and LinkedIn. So if you know someone who wants to attend, feel free to invite them and share the links to our platform. Here we also have the QR code or the code to Slido, where you can also ask the questions regarding the talking that our guest is gonna brilliantly give us today, and answer the polls that we might have during the talking. So let's continue here. Today, we are having Victoria Schrank talking about applying systemic coaching to workshop design. Victoria is an experienced designer and a coach for a happier work life. She is experienced in merging systemic coaching with the design thinking mindset, and she has 15 years of experience in creative and tech fields, always helping individuals to tap into their full potential while staying true to their authentic self. So really excited to hear from Victoria. A bit about me. I won't enter into so much detail. I'm Bruno. I'm the host for today. I'm associate product manager here in Product People. And well, here's a bit more of my resume. All of our links, you can find the resumes from all of our consultants, so I won't spend too much time on it. Moving forward, a bit more about Product People. What we do, our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great product faster. We empower our product manager community to share knowledge generously while manage the hands-on work of a product manager, owner, ops, or either product leader on a fractional basis. We onboard really fast, we align teams and deliver outcomes thanks to our in-house team. We encourage free events like this one for one of the biggest PM communities in Europe that has over 33,000 members nowadays. Before we begin, there's more. Let's do a quick icebreaker here before we start. You can open Slido through the QR code, as I mentioned, and enter the number you see on the screen. Also, for the ones watching on other platforms, feel free to share the answers in the comments if you like to. We had this question coming from Victoria, which is, can one be a workshop facilitator and a workshop participant at the same time? So you can respond the survey in Slido. With one, yes, why not? With two, no way. Or three, better not, but it happens a lot. We want to understand a bit more from you. And now I will hand over to Victoria. As I mentioned, she's gonna talk to us about the systemic coaching to workshop design. So thank you, Victoria, for participating, and looking forward to your talking. Over to you.
Thank you, Bruno, and thank you for an amazing introduction. I'm just going to share my screen with a presentation. So the topic is systemic coaching meets workshopping, and I wanted to start with kind of like a very quick introduction. Who am I? I mean, Bruno made it already, so just a quick summary. I'm a certified systemic personal and business coach, a workshop designer, UX UI designer, digital consultant, and I have kind of like in total 15 years of experience in the field, combining marketing and concept development. I'm also freelancing for a very long time, since 2016. I'm Berlin-based since 2009, and I'm an introvert and a curious one since I guess I was born. So that's kind of like brings me to the topic of why I'm so much into the idea of how can you make teamwork pleasant and fun for everyone, because I guess for introverts, it's especially challenging to really enjoy it and to be sure that everyone can be heard and everyone has a space to just be themselves and enjoy the process. So why actually I wanted to talk about systemic coaching and workshopping. Basically, it's of course based on a problem, on my frustration, which I had and I had to participate in pretty much long and fruitless discussions. And I just wrote a LinkedIn post on it yesterday. And it's basically, I think my issue was that I just couldn't make a poker face and kind of like pretend that I'm fine with this. So that's why I actually got really involved into ideas of how can you design workshops that are more enjoyable? How can you apply systemic coaching methods to this in order to make it really pleasant for all the participants and solution oriented? So a very tiny agenda for tonight. I'm gonna start with focusing on what is systemic coaching, just to kind of like set a basis for what we're going to talk about. Then things that coaching and facilitation have in common, and spoiler, there are a lot in common. Applying some coaching magic before the workshop, during the workshop, and after the workshop with some concrete ideas that you can just take. Feel free to screenshot it, write it down, make notes. You're welcome. And then we have time for Q&A that will come at the end. So what is systemic coaching? Basically, it's a solution and goal-oriented process. It's all about helping you to come to a solution. It can be done in one-on-one setting or in a group, which can be then a team coaching or like a couple coaching. And the goal of it is to open new possibilities, new angles to show the situation from a new perspective. And then you might wonder, what is my role, if not to give a solution? It's basically to guide and facilitate the process, like a facilitator, to help my clients discover new angles and perspectives and consider other systems of client, which means that if, for instance, I work with a client about some work topic, other systems can be their family life, their like private situation, maybe like their health, maybe their own work situation, then what happens in their team or in the company. So that's why it's systemic. And the tricky thing is to avoid imposing my solutions on a client. So it's not that I'm going to tell you how you should live your life or solve your business problem, but it's enabling you to find your own solution. So to make it more sustainable and authentic to kind of like how you are, your values and your needs. And as I said, coaching and facilitation, they have a lot in common. So in both ways, you guide and lead the process. In coaching and facilitation, we use a lot of visualizations and associations to make it easier to your target audience to kind of like see the patterns, understand insights, have solution-oriented discussions. We also ask open questions and lead a person or a team towards their solution space and support a person and a team in coming up with their own solutions, not trying to solve the problem yourself. I highlight it quite sometimes because it's actually one of the main issues during workshops that people expect you to be both facilitator and a participant. And I mean, maybe at the end we can talk about it and how you can deal with the situations. Then in both cases, in coaching and facilitation, we summarize, backtrack key insights or help the participants to kind of like stay on track. Follow people over process mindset, the agile mindset, which means flexibility. So if something doesn't work, we not try to kind of like stick to the process, but see what can work better for the team. Also stay impartial. So when it comes to some maybe political situations in the team, we not take sides and also take into account every voice and to make sure that everyone has a safe space to be heard. So here comes some ideas before the workshop. How can you basically implement systemic coaching thinking into the workshop preparation? The main thing is to align on goals and expectations. So before the workshop, it's a really good idea to actually reach out to your contact person, to your team, to people with whom you're going to have a workshop and ask them a couple of questions so that they're kind of like, they understand why they're taking part in the workshop, why they're so important, why we really want to have them. And so they have also an expectation of what's going to be there. So good questions are, for instance, what is it in it for you and your team? So sometimes workshops are just happening in a company and people are invited and they might not even want to or not have a clear idea of why are they there. So to ask them, okay, what can you get out of it? So maybe for like a product team, there was something different in the workshop as for a business team or a marketing team. So asking these questions helps them to kind of like understand how they can actually kind of like benefit from the workshop. Then also asking, how will a good outcome of the workshop look like for you? So like imagine the workshop was a success. How will you notice right at the end of the workshop that it was a good one? And this helps people, first of all, to get into this kind of like productive mindset that they think, okay, so what can be a good outcome? How can I measure what is a success, what is not, what is like my own KPIs in this? And when I talk about workshops today, I'm focusing on like product design, co-creation workshops. So it's not like a team coaching. When we work on some team problems or situations that happen in the team, but more on a kind of like product-based design situations, like design thinking workshops or a design sprint. And another idea is that basically you can ask a person how can they contribute to a workshop. So what are their special skills, maybe a special perspective that they can bring. The main idea is to kind of like get to this clarity of the workshop goal, and it can differ for different participants. And it's a good idea to ask beforehand so that people are motivated. Then what can we do during a workshop? Basics, like some hygiene things, like transparent rules beforehand and the reasons behind. For instance, when we're talking about design sprints or design thinking workshops, it's a good idea to explain why we're going to work alone together. So each person has time to work on certain things, and then we can discuss things in a group, explain why it makes sense, why you should trust the process, why we're going to use time boxing. Maybe also suggest that for this time of this workshop, your inner perfectionist can just take a break, go on holidays, because workshops is never about perfect. It's about making things done. Explain how the decision making will take place, if we're going to have a decider in the team or not. Then clear explanation of the process. So what we do, why do we do, how we do it. And you don't have to assume that everyone knows, for instance, what how my three questions are. So it's a good idea to explain before what is the task, why we do it, and how. And of course, that working towards the goal. So we know what is our goal, and if some kind of like sideway questions come into the process, we can park them in the so-called parking lot, so some space on a Miro board or like on a literal board, and saying, okay, it's a very important thing, but it's had to wait for the next time because today our focus is XYZ. So basically, it's your job to steer the discussion into a relevant track. And to kind of like see if something comes up, you can really help to facilitate the discussion. Is it a showstopper, or we can continue and maybe like park this on the parking lot? And later I'm gonna give you some examples of how you can actually work with this showstoppers or like a lot of critique for participants. So the first inspiration is, it's called Disney strategy, and I got it from a systemic thinking education that I did last year. Basically, it's a real approach that Walt Disney used when he was creating ideas. And it's when he was doing it, he like literally had three rooms. A creative room where he was like playing a role of a creator, thinking totally free, just like dreaming about what's possible. So no constraints, no critique. Then he had a second room where he acted as a realist, a maker, this like make things happen mindset, kind of like a very goal-oriented project manager, thinking how can I implement this thing. And then there was a third room where he put on a hat of a constructive critic, and it was like a constructive feedback to his own ideas. So how I have implemented it to a group workshop session, I was doing a kind of like adaptive design sprint for a big corporation, and I knew that there might be some issues with some critique or things that I might be not doable because there were different teams involved and people had different level of information that they had. So after we have developed some like creative assets, so like some kind of like wireframes, very, very rough mock-ups of how a solution can look like, I said, okay, now we're going to have 15 minutes and we all get into this like maker mindset. So I basically explained what is the Disney strategy, and everyone had like a yellow sticker or like whatever color, and kind of like put on a head of a maker. So like, and they had this time to feedback on all the ideas with like real, how can you implement it? How can you make it happen? Without any critique, just like really, how can you make it happen? You don't have to feedback on all ideas, but maybe on the ones that you really believe in. And after the 15 minutes were over, then it was the time for the constructive critical. So it was like the same idea, set the stage, what is the constructive critic? And then they had a chance to give a constructive feedback. And constructive means not like, oh, I don't like it, it's not nice, but more like, okay, that might be this issue. How can we solve it? And then I switched again to the maker time, so for the third round. And it was really amazing to see how people were like getting to this maker mindset, saying, oh, actually, you can solve this problem by doing X, Y, Z. So it was really cool. It worked amazing in a very interdisciplinary team where we had people of all possible backgrounds. So I can highly recommend trying it out. Then, as a bonus for this task, basically the participants, they also have a feeling that they have contributed to the idea. So they kind of like are more set on helping these ideas to come to world because they added not only to their idea, but to all of them. Another inspiration, I called it the twilight zone. And it's basically for the situations where you have a lot of voices like, oh, we can't do it because of X, Y, Z. Clarity on viability, when it's not clear if it's like some real legal challenges behind, some real technical or business issues, or it's more like an assumption. Or when the ideas are being blocked because someone says we can't even think in this direction because of XYZ challenge. How I applied it after we had some expert interviews and also kind of like design thinking, design sprint type of workshop, I have explained what is the method about. It's basically placing these challenges in three categories. And we, in a team, we can discuss together if it's really something that it can be changed or it absolutely can't be changed, like never ever, and everyone is sure about it, or it's more like a twilight zone, like gray zone. Maybe you can change it, maybe we just don't have enough information, maybe we need to get on board some legal person or some like decider. And it really helps to get over like these blocks that prevent us from creating further ideas and doing further steps, and to see, okay, what should we check? What is this twilight zone? What should we check? What can be changed? And we can get already information on how, and what is like really no way, so we don't even think in this direction. Another inspiration, I called it interdependency. And basically it works when you have challenges. For instance, you have developed different action points, what you can do, and the team can't decide, should they start with action A or B, or maybe they, at the end, you have like 5 different ideas or projects that you want to start at the same time. And of course, it's not feasible, so we don't want to do it. So how can we basically prevent spending another 3 hours on discussing things, but more like on making things happen? And for this, you can also use a coaching technique. And it's basically some questions to explore this interdependency. For instance, you can ask the team, like imagine we had worked on project A and it turned out a complete success. How would this success look like? Like how would it be? Maybe to get some ideas to make it more tangible. And then what impact will a success of this project A have on a project B or on project C? So that you can see, okay, how will it affect it? Maybe if we make project A happen, maybe project B will be not even so important afterwards, or maybe it will be way easier to make it. Of course, you can also ask another way around. So imagine we work on project B and it turned out to be a complete success. How would the success look like in this case? And what is the impact for the project A? So that people can see, okay, what is this interdependency between different projects? It can also be the same between teams. So impact, which kind of impact will project A have on team marketing or on team, I don't know, like business development, to see like how will this kind of like choice on what project to work on correlate with different systems inside the company. So different projects, different teams, different like timelines of projects. And of course, what also works quite well is a impact effort matrix, and it basically means that you place different projects or ideas along this matrix. So something that has a lot of impact and little effort, that basically it's something doable, or something that takes a lot of effort but little impact. And there's a question, why should we even do this? And of course, something that has a lot of effort and like a lot of impact than something to take on as a project. And by doing this, you can also see if teams are aligned in how far there is impact and effort in each particular project. So if for instance, some team members have a very different polar opinions, you can take time and room for a discussion to see what are their arguments. Maybe they just don't have information that another person have. And it's also a good idea to align the team and to see how they assess this impact and effort of certain projects. And another really fun idea, it's basically the weirdest decision or the weirdest solution. And for this, it can be really useful if you have following challenges. For instance, the team has no ideas or very few ideas, or everyone has kind of similar standard ideas that everyone already knows and ChatGPT also knows them, or the ideas are not bold enough and there is a wish to have something just beyond the ordinary, or the team is just bored and frustrated. So how does it work? You invite the team to say, okay, we're not even gonna try to develop some good ideas. Forget the good ones, forget great ideas, no way, not today. So what could be the worst solution ever? And then you can take maybe some time, 15 minutes, and ask team to develop the worst possible solution, something that's really horrible. What can it be? Then you can also ask them to develop the craziest solution, something really insane, totally crazy. No one will ever come up with such an idea, or something even more wild, what would Elon Musk do? Some kind of Elon Musk type of ideas. And this helps to kind of get rid of these constraints of this tunnel vision, and also to just maybe use it as an icebreaker to make the team feel a bit more comfortable. And then you can see, okay, if it's the worst solution, what can we do to make it better? Or maybe people will come up with some great ideas in the process because it just opens up different perspectives. So then the workshop is over. What we're gonna do after the workshop? And when the workshop comes to an end, it's also very important not just to say, okay, cool, thank you, done, but to see how can we make sure that the things that we have discussed today, the ideas, the next steps, they will actually come to life. So figuring out, okay, what can be the next steps? What other team members think the steps can be? And maybe you can decide which steps are the easiest, which steps are the hardest, which steps are the most important, so that we can place it maybe in a timeline of where should we start, what should we do next, and how can you ensure that the steps are implemented. So maybe there is some blocker, maybe you need some resources, some help, some input, and it's really good to finish the workshop with these things in mind so that your result is more sustainable and it's highly likely that it will be implemented, so that it's clear at the end who is doing what, when, what are the responsibilities, who are in charge. Basically make it easier for people to proceed. So basically that was the end, so that we have enough time for the Q&A, and feel free to stay in touch. You can also contact me afterwards if you want. If you haven't made a screenshot of a slide and you want one, I can send you. I can also send you the presentation. So feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, thank you. And I'm looking forward to hear your questions.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I'll just share here my screen again, just to share again our QR code and Slido. So please feel free to drop your questions again in our Slido or through the comments in LinkedIn as well. And thank you for listening. And thank you, Victoria, for bringing this creative talk. I'll start with a question that I have from my side for you. That is, you mentioned that usually we have to, whenever we are facilitating a workshop, we have to stay impartial. So and practice our impartiality. But do you have any advice for someone who are not actually used to facilitate workshops, or doesn't have, as you mentioned, you're an introvert, or people that are also introvert, how they can manage to and thrive facilitating a workshop when they need to do it?
Thank you for your question. So I guess it's two parts. The first one about how to stay impartial, and for this one, I think it's really important to make it clear what is your role. So I experienced it a lot that I'm invited to make a workshop. And since I'm also a UX designer and a concept developer, sometimes people want me to be also a participant, maybe like to do a prototype afterwards or to take part in the ideation. And if this happens, and I'm a freelancer, I can't just say, no, I'll never do it. It's not right. Of course, I will still work with a client and just try to find ways. Sometimes I work with a co-facilitator. So for instance, if my client really wants me to take part in, for instance, like ideation phase, I'd say, okay, then for this part, I take off my facilitator hat and my co-facilitator, he will facilitate or she will facilitate the process, and I will then switch the roles. Then I will be kind of like not impartial, but myself. But as a facilitator, you have to be impartial because it's about not about your opinion, not about your preferences, but helping the team. And it's oftentimes people will feel way more comfortable when they notice that you don't have any agenda, any politics in your mind. You're just really there for the whole team, for everyone. And for the second question, for the introvert part, I think it's really like a massive misunderstanding that only extroverts can be amazing facilitators, because basically what introverts can do well, like listening. I mean, maybe it's also a stereotype, but introverts, I know they're really great at like listening, reflecting, and it's not that you're shy, it's just the way how you gain energy. So for instance, like myself as a definitely more introvert, it's just for me, I gain energy when I'm like in small groups or on my own, but at the same time, I'm like social introvert. So I enjoy talking to people, I enjoy helping people. And it's just about actually using your superpowers, that you have empathy. You can also sense maybe who needs your help in the team or who is not feeling that comfortable. You can really like sense it and get there. And I think as a facilitator, you're not like the superhero who is just kind of like having their own amazing things like a rock star on the stage. It's more that you're a supporter, you're like a guide. And you're there to support the team and to empower the team. So it's not the like super loud role where you want to be in the center of attention and have all eyes on you. It's more like making the team feel comfortable and helping them.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those are great advice. Again, myself, I'm an introvert, sometimes even shy, but it's really nice to know that, again, as you mentioned, we tend to be good listeners. So yeah, pretty good advice. We have another question here that it's, how do we go with separating members' personal opinion from project goals?
Separating members' personal opinions from project goals. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I think it's also important in the very beginning to see, okay, because of course it's a work situation, so we have our personal goals, but also our work goals, like in our role. And that's why I really invite to ask before the workshop, what are your goals, or what do you want to take out of the workshop? Basically to make sure that they have time and room in the workshop to make sure that their goals, their needs are met. Also reframing the focus on the workshop. So what's we're going to work on, why is it important for the company? And as I said in the beginning, like how can your team benefit from this? How can you benefit from this? And of course, I mean, I like to ask this really beforehand and not in the beginning, because I find it personally weird when we start the workshop and I ask this expectation, then people expect all possible things and it's really hard to align them. So I really like to take some time and ask it beforehand and then make sure that the way I prepare the workshop, there is really people can find this alignment and they see that, okay, at least their needs can be partially met or their interests are being taken into consideration. That's why I just invite you to ask the things beforehand so that people felt that they're being heard and their opinion is taken into account.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Thank you. And we have another question coming in, which is, what inspired you to specialize in systemic coaching? And what advice would you give to someone interested in pursuing a career in systemic coaching as well?
That's a nice question. Thank you. Basically, what inspired me, I guess I had this inspiration really like maybe definitely 10 years ago or something. I noticed it because when I was working on my side projects or projects that I managed to found myself, they were all related to coaching to kind of like this positive psychology. And I used to work with psychologists. I invited coaches on board, and I was always saying like, oh, if I were young, if I was 16 or 20, I would go and study psychology or kind of like positive psychology to become a coach. So I was talking for like really long time about these things. And at some point I just realized, okay, I would never be 16 again, no way, but like I can still just do and study it and try to get into this whole systemic coaching mindset. And I think what inspired me, I used to work as a mentor, and I noticed that sometimes just like telling people how they should do things or sharing my experience is really not enough. And there are ways to help people, like in business context and career context, that is definitely way more powerful, or at least like for certain cases, than just like telling them what to do, because this like solutions that come direct from people, I guess they can be way more sustainable and also empowering, like helping you to become more like self-sufficient. And that's why I thought, okay, I think it's a really good idea to contribute my mentoring experience with systemic coaching. Yes, and I did my education last year here in Berlin, also like offline. I really enjoyed it. It was in German, so I'm not quite sure in how far it's relevant for this target audience, but I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's a good advice for someone who's seeking to specialize in systemic coaching. We have another one coming in. Can you share examples of how systemic coaching has led to significant transformation within organization or individuals?
I guess there are definitely a lot of examples out there. I can't really share personal cases. I work now more with like one-to-one coaching, so with business clients on topics like career coaching, business coaching, and basically the topics I often work with is, for instance, reframing some negative experience which happened in the career maybe some time ago and really affects how you perceive your work situation right now. Also working with different kinds of like blockages or limiting beliefs, like I'm afraid to present, or I don't know, like working as a team lead, I'm afraid to do this. So how can you work with this kind of things and framing these beliefs? Also reorientation. For instance, if someone wants to switch field, if they feel that they are not entirely happy with what they do, but they can't really say why, or if they notice that what they do is not anymore aligned with their values, their needs, they don't feel that what they do is really fulfilling, and they seek this kind of fulfillment. So this kind of topics. I haven't worked as a organizational coach, so I guess it's a bit different. But in a business coaching situation, it's really based on kind of like a goal or a need a client has right now. And the way I do my coaching, I don't have like a one program fits every case, but I adjust it to kind of like needs of my client, what they have right now, and how can we get there. It basically has all possible tools involved, from like guided meditations, visualizations, something that feels like a workshop session. I also use a lot of like Miro board, but I try not to get only the cognitive part, the cognitive side, but also like the emotional side, because oftentimes how you feel at work or in a certain situation that affects it a lot, and you can change things by working also like with your body, because sometimes like if you're afraid of something, you also really have this physical sensation, and sometimes in order to address the problem you have to get to it from all possible levels, so like cognitive, emotional, like even physical one.
Okay, we do have received two more here.
Yes, last two questions.
How do you ensure that the changes brought about by systemic coaching are sustainable in the long term?
How to ensure that changes brought about by systemic So it basically, in order to ensure that these changes are sustainable, in the first step, of course, that's the things that I told you at the end. So when you're defining the next steps, make sure that they are like really doable, and how can you make them doable, and what happens if something comes up in between, like, I don't know, as often happens, for instance, like in companies, there is not enough resources or another project jumps in. So what can you do in order still to implement the steps? And of course, then working with a team. So if it's like a person is in-house, like regular checkups, basically about the project timeline, how it's going, also how does the team feels. So it really depends on the case, but you can really make sure that through this like regular meetups, you can see where is it going, and depending on the topic, if it's like a design sprint, of course, then it goes into the implementation phase. What I think is also important is to have some kind of like post-mortem at the end. So when the project is over, we have like a really time and space to have a like finishing the project sort of workshop or meeting. And it's also a good time to reflect on what went well, what can be improved, but also to give this like appreciation and gratification to team members, because oftentimes people work a lot, there are lots of stress, and there is just like no time to say what was actually good and to say thank you and to highlight it. And this is something that inspires people a lot. So actually I highly recommend introducing this kind of postmortems in your work life if they're not there already, and not just having a focus on like how to optimize it, how to make it more efficient, but also like people, because if people are happy and they feel that they are appreciated, that they have this like time and space to learn from each other and to get this gratification, they will be more productive and happier, and they will stay longer in company. So you have to invest less into recruitment. That's why I think it's also very important for sustainable project work to make sure that project end is also kind of like a celebrated and lessons learned, a bit like these takeaways are taken and learned from the process.
Cool. Yeah, totally agree with you. I think celebrating the small wins, it's always good to make people more interested in continue doing their good job. We have another one, which is, what are the emerging trends in systemic coaching that professionals should be aware of today?
Mm-hmm. Well, the whole systemic coaching is kind of like an emerging trend as such. And the amazing thing about systemic coaching is that it can take things from all possible fields. So I already implemented design thinking methods in systemic coaching. My colleagues who are more from, for instance, like a yoga teacher, they implement like practices from meditation, from yoga in their coaching. So it's something that's like a really organism, like a living organism, and you can kind of like mix and match different methods and just see what works for you. Also, like what is just authentic for yourself. So I can't tell you what is like the most popular trend nowadays, but it's really just seeing what is working and how can you implement it into the business context, because nowadays the boundaries between like, okay, what is like a business method, what is a business problem, what is a personal problem, they're also blurred. So when I work with my clients on some career topics, like 90%, we have a lot of topics that are related to their personal life, to their aspirations. And that's why I think it's really interesting that when you look at this like system work, you can't look at it in a vacuum. Like there are so many other things that are correlated that are near this work system. And I think it's really important to take them into account, like your values, your interests, your personal life, all other things in your life that are important. And the same comes to like a team inside a company, that it also doesn't function in a vacuum, but there are other things around.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We just received one more. I think it's a really interesting one. How can you handle 18 participants in an online workshop that has a tight agenda, but a lot of ego in the room?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely challenging, and I can imagine that it might be really like, well, first of all, maybe to question why there should be a tight agenda, if there should be 18 participants in an online worker, because oftentimes not the quantity, but more the combination of people that works. Maybe, because I love challenging things. I would ask, if I'm invited to run this workshop, okay, maybe what is the goal? Maybe it makes sense to split it. Maybe it makes sense to invite certain people as experts for one part of the workshop, and then just say, oh, thank you for your contribution. That was your part of the workshop. If you want, we can kind of like highlight what's going on afterwards for you. Also, like this idea of being impartial and having like a very clear standing. So as a facilitator, I'm in charge of the process. So then it's my job to basically manage these discussions. And when I see that a lot of ego is happening or the discussion is just not helpful right now, I would notice what a person is saying, but I would make sure that we park it in the parking lot and then just make sure that basically we can proceed further without having these interruptions, and just using this method like working together alone, where each participant has time to work on their own solution or to think for the questions or like whatever's happening in the workshop, that basically people who are usually more quiet and shy, they still have time and space to do these things. And then I would also make sure that the time that another person uses to kind of like say their opinion, that it's also limited, and I will explain why. So it's actually for the goal, even for this person, that we limit this time when someone speaks so that we can achieve the goals that are relevant for all of us. And again, that's why in the very beginning, I ask people what they want to get out of the workshop. And then I ensure when I do the introduction that basically we can reach this goal by following the process. And there are certain things that are definitely should be there, that we allow everyone to be heard, that we have like time boxing and why it's important. For instance, also boosts creativity. And what I also say, it's like, sometimes you have like great plans and amazing ideas, but implementation is the key. So if at the end of the workshop you haven't implemented anything, you just have some like concepts there in the air, they can be the best concepts ever, but it's like nothing without something that it's more tangible. So that's why like this inner perfectionist, maybe this like someone who's like super control freak, you can just say, okay, for this time of this workshop, we just try something different. Let's see this as an experiment. Just invite people also just to try something different just for this particular time. And then afterwards, they can do things how they used to do, no worries. And in my experience, that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. And I think also apply, as you mentioned, applying the inspirations and the techniques that you share with us might be really helpful, and of course having the goal for the workshop might be helpful to manage this kind of situation. While again, I think it's the last time that we have here for you to send the questions to us. Again, we're receiving through Slido and through LinkedIn. While we have this last time for you to send, I'll share a bit more about product people. Yep. Our interim product managers cover parental leave, scale your product management team quickly, or lead key initiatives while bridging the gap until a full-time employee joins. We cover parental leave from 3 to 12 months, or unstaffed permanent position, or even for specific project that you need a product manager. With product people, you can get temporary help to drive product discovery and deliver for deadline and create big impact in a short time. We also provide coaching for your product management team to reach their full potential through streamlining process from 0 to 1, including product ops and program management. We can also help you to run the discovery to uncover the next impactful initiative or product. We have a bunch of use cases in our website with a lot of B2C clients and a lot of B2B also clients. And it's also worth noting that we supported over 200 cross-functional teams and 70 clients from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. We have 42 product leaders and product manager consultants in-house to deliver high-quality service to our clients. And we take pride in having 62% women in the team, with 66% in leadership roles. Once again, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop it in our Slido. We can also share it later with Victoria here. Feel free to subscribe to our newsletter by reading this QR code as well. You will receive inspiring product stories and insights in your inbox. And thank you again, Victoria, for your talk. I think we did not receive any other questions so far. Just give a quick update on our next talking would be, with Raluca Bojananu, Independence Unlocked, the PM's Path to Impact and Leadership will be our next talk. And again, thank you, Victoria, for participating, for providing the great insights that you brought to us. And thank you, everyone who participated so far in our live stream. See you next